And he points to me and he says, and you, my friend, are single-handedly ruining racing. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not ruining your racing. He goes, well, maybe it's not you, but it's your effing company. And he shoves me on the ground and takes off underneath the tunnel. And people went to try to find him. They never could find him. Don't know who he was. And at that point in time, I called my wife. I said, this is it. And she goes, it's probably time. She goes, 36 years of being together. She says, and this, all we hear all night long is complaints.
It's the Kenny Wallace Conversation, brought to you by JEGS.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Kenny Conversation, brought to you by JEGS, the leader in high-performance aftermarket car parts. Remember to go to jegs.com for anything you need to fix your everyday vehicle up or your hot rod. Well, you are looking at one of the most popular people in the whole world of auto racing industry. That is Irish Saunders. Irish was the representative and the face of Hoosier Tires for 40 years. And we're going to talk all about Irish. He's retired now from Hoosier. Irish, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great, Herm. I'm doing absolutely fantastic.
I love the logo in the background. Where are you at?
Yeah, well, I'm at beautiful Swan Lake Resort in Plymouth, Indiana here. It's a golf resort with hotels and indoor pool and spa, 2 18-hole golf courses. Herm, do you golf?
I am a golfer, but you bring up this other subject, Irish. I was unloading a race car a couple years ago. I torn 2 tendons, 80%. So right now, all I can do is chip. But yes, I like golfing. Can't drive right now, but a one wood or
I can drive, Herm. I can drive the golf cart real well. But I can't. I can't drive the rest of it.
Yeah, I can't drive the golf ball. But I've raced at Plymouth when they put dirt on it.
Yep.
Now it's back. Now Plymouth Speedway's back to asphalt.
Right.
But when I raced at Plymouth on dirt, I stayed right there. Beautiful resort. Yeah.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, it's 2 18-hole golf courses here, Herm. It's on 520 acres, and it's the best kept secret in northern Indiana. I've always said that. I mean, I was born and raised here in Lakeville.
Yeah.
I live 2 miles. I live in the same house I was born and raised in, and it's 2 miles from where Hoosier Tire Corporate was at.
Hold on. That did not go over my head. Did you just say you still live in the house you were born in?
Absolutely. Bought it from my parents. 2 miles from Hoosier.
Oh my God, that is incredible. And you still feel good about it.
Oh, I feel great. The community here has been great. Went to school with the Newton girls. I mean, it's Bob's 2 daughters went to high school with them. I mean, it's been a great little community. Lakeville is.
You know what? Let's start right there. All right, everybody. That is Irish Saunders, and we are going to celebrate his career. So when I read up on you, of course, everybody knows you. You are the face of Hoosier Tire. Even though you've retired, and everybody knows that man you're looking at right now. One of the most important people in the industry, because Hoosier Tire is so big. They're everywhere. But let's start right there in Lakeville, Indiana, the Plymouth, Indiana area. Let's start right there. How in the world did you get involved in racing as a kid?
Well, Herm, it goes back to when I was born. When I was 6 months old, I was going to races. My father, he was from South Dakota, and he moved back here. He was on his way to the Ed Sullivan Show with the Dog and Pony Show.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And he broke down in South Bend, Indiana, right, with his car. And he met my mother here in South Bend, and they got married, and I was born, and they lived in Lakeville, the same house, like I say, I lived in. So I was going to races all my life. And, Herm, back when I was like 11, 12 years old, my mother I'd sit in the grandstands with my mom, and my dad would be up in the tower, and he'd be announcing the races. And back then you had the reel-to-reel tape recorders. You remember those?
Oh, yeah.
And I would sit there and I would announce the races while my dad was announcing. I'd do it myself. Well, just so happens Dad was announcing at South Bend Motor Speedway here, right? and a gentleman by the name of Louis Freeburn. It did that Freeburn track grinding. Do you remember that back in the day?
Yeah.
He owned South Bend, and it was the spring of 72. He says, hey, he says, your dad was playing a video or a recording of you announcing, and you sound pretty good. He said, how would you like to announce with your father? I'm like, yeah, great. So at 12 years old, Herm, I started announcing with my dad, right?
Yeah.
So I've been around racing all my life. I raced motocross in 1972. I started racing motocross until I think 1979. I did that. So I was involved in that also. But I really loved racing. And my dad announced at different racetracks. So I was a racetrack brat, per se, that I would go to all the races, kind of like your family. You went to all of them, right? And I really enjoyed it. But I went to school at Lakeville Elementary, and then I went to LaVille High School there in Lakeville. And in the summer of 76, so let me back up, rewind one more time here. In 74, Bob Newton was in South Bend, Indiana. And what he did is he moved out to Lakeville to build the recap shop because he was doing recaps. Okay. And he did that in Lakeville in 74. And as I'm riding the school bus, Herman, we drive by Hoosier on the main highway on US 31. I'm thinking, man, how cool would that be just to go there and work at that place?
Racing tires.
Yeah, racing tires. Racing. How cool would that be? So the summer of 76 during summer break, I went in there, and of course I'd known Bob and the family because I went to school with the daughters, right, at LaVille.
Let's give a shout out to Mary Purvis right now. Yes. Mary, we love you. She is so good to me. She sponsored my dirt car. Mary Purvis, we love you, Mary.
Well, let me tell you something about Mary real quick. We have a lot of things in common because you know what? We share the same birthday, March 17th.
Oh.
And that's how I got the name Irish. I was born on March 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day.
I'll be darned.
And yeah, and I want to just let her know that she is 1 year older than I am. Just so you know.
Oh, she would do it to you.
Oh, 100%.
She would 100%. Give it to you too. So
and I know she's working.
Yeah.
She's working on a book for her father about her father too. I know she's working on that right now too, which will be very good. But during 76, I went in there and I started working on the dock. And at that point in time, there was 15 employees. That's all we had. That was it, 15. And I worked there for 2 summers, and then I dated this gal that her dad had a mobile home RV lot that they sold mobile homes and RV. And as soon as I graduated, I went to work for them and was a sales manager there. And then one day, I broke up with this gal, right? And her mom didn't care for me, so it got ugly. And so Margie and Mary told her dad, said, you ought to look at hiring Irish to come in here and do PR stuff and advertising and stuff. And so Bob called me, would have been New Year's Eve of 1980. And he called me to come down there, and him and I sat, because Hoosier always back then, they used to shut down for 2 weeks, right, over Christmas and New Year's. And we sat there for 5 hours, Herm, and reminisced about old racing, Don Gregory and Bob Seneker and Terry Seneker and Rich Seneker and all these racers, which I knew growing up. And we reminisced about that. And he came to me and he goes, well, I'd like to hire you. But he said, I'm going to pay you this money. I'm like, wait a minute, Bob, that's half of what I'm making now. I am not going to. always looking for a deal, right? He's always looking for a deal, right?
Everybody, yep.
Yeah. So I said, I don't want to back up in life. And he goes, well, okay. He said, I'll tell you what I got to do. He said, I got to talk to Mother, which was Joyce Newton, right? He said, I got to talk to Mother and find out. So, Kenny, I no longer left Hoosier, drove back to my house. I was still living with my parents, 2 miles away, and the phone rang. And it was Bob. And Bob's like, I talked to Mother. And she said, yep, we'll go ahead and do what you want. She said, let's try it for 6 months. And if it works out, we'll just continue. But if it doesn't work out, we'll just separate and be friends. Well, it just kept going. It just kept going.
I'm thinking that, sometimes when people tell me stories, I put myself in that place. I'm thinking that Bob Newton, the owner of Hoosier Tires, when you and him talked for 5 hours, you obviously had something in common, or else you don't sit there and talk for 5 hours. What was the age difference between you and Bob?
Oh, let's see. I want to say it was
30 years?
30
Yeah.
years probably, Kenny.
What is it? Was it an emotional talk? Why did the owner of Hoosier Tires, Bob Newton, why did he like you so much?
Yeah, it was, I don't know. I mean, him and I just clicked, you know. He was, to be honest with you, he was like, him and Joyce were like second parents to me, right?
Yeah.
Growing up. I mean, he was always there for you. He had passion for racing. I had passion for racing because of racing motocross. I never raced cars before in my life, but I raced motocross. And so I had that drive and that urge to go one step further and try to win. And that's what he had, you know. He was a racer's racer, you know.
Yeah.
And he always said, kid. He always called me kid. Sometimes I wonder if he knew my name because he always called me. So he'd say, kid, just always remember, you always got to be humble. He says, I always made my living sleeping on creepers and eating bologna sandwiches, you know. And I never forgot that. And
I know your area very well because obviously besides my brother Rusty Wallace racing in ASA, I raced in ASA. I spent part of my childhood right up there, Indiana, all the ASA races. And one thing I've always noticed about the people, I'd say in the Michigan area more so, and you're right there by Michigan, is they're Dutch. Dutch people like Bob Seneker, Mike Eddy. These people are very quiet. I always knew Bob as I call him staunch. Staunch to means we're not playing around, although we'll drink some beer at night. Was there any people that you knew were Dutch that were very, serious all the time? What was Bob like? Was he Dutch or not?
Gosh, I don't know, but he was pretty serious. He once in a while he'd crack a joke here and there, but he was very serious. And I got to tell this story real quick before I forget it. But your buddy and our buddy Schrader, right?
Yep. Oh yeah.
So we're at Nazareth, Pennsylvania, in 1982.
Schrader would say, "Oh,
yeah, 1900. We were back then, right?"
Yep.
And we were at Nazareth, Pennsylvania. It was the final Silver Crown race of the year. And I don't know if you ever heard this story before, but it was the final race of the year. Ron Schumann was leading the points, right? And we're there with Bob, and Schrader's running second in Blackie Fortune's car, the Rose Brother trucking car, right? The 39 car.
Yeah. And
in hot laps, he blows up. Well, Benny Leba, who was a Hoosier distributor, him and Bob, they worked at Bendix together. That's where they first started, Ben Leba and Bob Newton.
Was that Brakes? Brakes?
Yes. Yep. It sure was.
Right.
Here in South Bend. Yep.
Right.
Yep. They worked at Bendix, and Benny was a distributor. He also owned the cars that Sheldon Kinzer drove, the Sprint cars and Silver Crown car.
Big names.
Big names, yep. And I remember Schrader coming down there, blew a motor in hot laps. And he comes down to Benny and he says, Benny, he says, we blew up. He said, I got a shot at winning this championship. I can beat Schumann, and I need a car. We don't have another motor. So Benny, he says, hey, you got to talk to the big guy. So he has to go down and talk to Sheldon. So I never saw this part of it, but I heard this many a times. He puts his, Sheldon had humongous hands. I mean, big hands, right? And he said, he puts his hand on Schrader's shoulder. He says, Schrader, I'll let you drive my car, but they're under one situation or one deal here. He said, what's that? He says, your firstborn son, you name him after me.
And Schrader told me, but I never knew the moment.
Yeah.
Sheldon Schrader.
Schrader. Yeah. Sheldon Schrader. And he goes out and he wins. He wins the race, right? Or maybe he ran second. He was good enough that he won the points. So we got the points championship. So we go back. Well, the night before was, as we've all said, it was pretty ugly the night before. So we weren't, but we were going to celebrate the next night, right? We've all had those nights before, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And we go back and we're down in the bar celebrating, having a drink. And Schrader looks at me and goes, where's Bob at? I said, well, Bob's up in room 213, right? Whatever it was.
Bob Newton.
Yep. He's up in the room because I never saw Bob drink ever. Bob was not a drinker at all. Him and Joyce, never. So he says, well, let me call him. So he calls him up. He says, Bob, we just won the Silver Crown Championship for Hoosier. You need to come down here to the bar. We need to have a drink. That was the only time in my life that I always said Bob came down and he had a 7-7. When it was all said and done, he said, well, I'm going back to the room. Here's $100 bill. Next round's on me.
Wow.
That was the only time.
That's a badass move by Bob to get up out of bed
Yep.
when you don't want to drink.
Yep.
And we've all been there before. You're like, oh man, I just feel like laying down. Stay right there for a minute, Irish. I said at the start of this when I was introducing you, everybody knows Irish. Kenny Schrader, obviously, everybody knows that we are lifetime friends. We do Herman Schrader. Comes out every Wednesday morning on the Dirty Mo media platform. But one thing I've known about Kenny Schrader that I'd like you to respond to is it's like when Schrader started in that open wheel world, it's like everybody knows him everywhere. He can go anywhere. And I mean, with any form of, we're talking AJ Foyt. What is it about Kenny Schrader and that open wheel world? I mean, everybody knows Schrader. Is that one reason why stories like that? That's incredible.
Well, here's the thing, Herm, and you're no different than he is because of the fact that you're characters. And you look at it now. I mean, no, seriously. I mean, you look back at the Kevin Olsons, right? That ran
yeah.
And Naked Nick, right? Gomrick, right?
Yeah, Nick Montgomery. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So I mean, Nick Gomrick and Kevin Olson and Kenny Schrader, they're characters. They were characters. Yeah. Everybody loved to be around them, Yeah. And one thing, and we'll get into some of the Tony Stewart stories and Jeff Gordon stories here, but one thing I always remember about Schrader, he never, ever forgot where he came from.
Boy, no kidding. I mean, right now to this day. Hey, Kevin Olson.
Yeah.
When I first met Kevin Olson, he was a little bit older. Then I went to the Chili Bowl, and I started learning a little bit. Kevin Olson, he might have been a character, but boy, I read the stories of him and Jeff Gordon going over to Australia or New Zealand, wherever it was. Yeah. But Kevin Olson was a badass open wheel midget racer. I mean, he could win, couldn't he?
He was unbelievable, and without a doubt, some of the most fun that I have. I got to tell you a quick Kevin Olson story here.
It's Schrader, I love it. Yeah. I love this.
And here's the thing: the Seymours, Bobby Seymour.
Schrader talks. Are they from Boston?
They're from Marlboro, Massachusetts. Yeah, right by Boston. Yeah. Yep. The Schraders. The Seymours and Schraders were tight, but we called it. I think it was the Hoosier Autumn Classic we had here at Plymouth Speedway when it was asphalt, and it was 2 50-lap midget races. Well, Olson's here and Seymours are here, and I got this Hoosier van, and we're going up to this baseball game in South Bend. It's the South Bend Cubs now, but we were going to a baseball game on Saturday night before the race on Sunday. And we're driving down this back road, and there's this dead raccoon in the middle of the road. So Olson's like, stop. And he gets out, he picks this raccoon up, and he takes the raccoon, he puts it in a box in the van, right? Puts it in a box. So we get there, and here's Seymour's, and they're all there. Hey guys, how you doing? And he's like, Schrader's and Olson's like, hey, get in that box. There's something for you guys.
Oh my God!
He looks in there and he opens it up, and Seymour's like, you got to be kidding me! And here's this dead raccoon in this box, right?
Oh God!
So they're like, get out of here, So we still have this dead raccoon, and I'm like, Olson, we can't leave this thing set in here. He goes, no, we'll take it out. So we go and park out in this parking lot, and there's this homeless guy with a shopping cart with a bunch of tin cans in it, Herm. And Olson tells the guy, says, hey, if you go down there, there's a box. There's a ton of tin cans in that box down there. So all of a sudden, we hear all these tin cans flying out of this shopping cart, and the guy's yelling and screaming because he opens it up, and here's that dead raccoon in there.
Oh my God.
That was a Kevin Olson. That's one of many stories from Kevin Olson, right?
Well, hopefully Kevin's daughter, Katie, hears this. Yeah. You listen, I know everybody knew Kevin as fun, really eccentric, really different. But boy, when I really studied, I didn't know anything about him, but I met Katie at Terre Haute, and Schrader looked at me and said, hero's daughter. And when Schrader knows that I don't know a lot about the early days of open wheel. So Kenny Schrader always gives me a shortcut, and he looks at me right now and he goes, hero. Hero means this guy has done it. Yeah. But, okay, listen, we got to celebrate you.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Let's start like this. And we'll get back to some stories about Scott Bloomquist, Tony Stewart, things like that. But let's stay at Hoosier. So we've established now that the Newton family fell in love with you. They hire you. You're there for 40 years. And I want to go right to a story that I think might take a little bit of time. And that's the reason we like to keep this at an hour, Irish. And me and you, we can have 5 parts.
Yeah.
I want to go right to the tire war with NASCAR. And I know we're skipping a lot, but we've established where you're from, how you got to Hoosier. We've done a good job.
Yep.
Tell me about this time. Do you remember when Bob came out of his office? How did it happen from your recollection? How do you remember Hoosier Tire going, okay, we're going to make some tires and we're going to the NASCAR Cup Series? Tell me about the Goodyear Hoosier Tire War.
Well, yeah, that was 1988 and 89, bias plies, right? And Bob entered it in 88, right? And our first win, and I'll never forget this, was Rockingham with Neil Bonnet, right?
I'll be darned, I didn't know it was Neil. I was going to say Jeff Bodine, but
no, Neil Bonnet, because Jeff Bodine comes later. It comes in 94 when we return back, but 88 and 89, we'll go through it. And NASCAR was to the point where, they had to, they said, Bob, if you're going to be involved in this, you got to bring enough tires for every single one of the teams. Because if there would ever be a problem, well, we got to be able to, for one manufacturer, we got to be able to step in and supply the whole field.
Wow.
So we go through 88 and we're learning things and we're getting better. And right back then I was helping with the Busch Grand National deal, which I was having to race that, what was it? Was it the Cox car that you drove? Was that what it was?
I drove the Cox Treat Lumber. My first year was 1989, 90, 91. But yeah, right in that. Okay.
Oh. And Herm, I used to man, I got to beat Wallace. What in the heck? And I'm Robert Presley. And I mean, we're talking just let's come on, Joe Bessie. Can you just dump Wallace if you get a chance? Just get to the bumper.
Joe Bessie in the black 7 car, I think. I don't remember, but go ahead. Yeah,
so back then we were doing that, and I'm going to go fast forward to 89 Daytona because you'll love this one. So that was when Goodyear first came out with radials, right?
Oh yeah.
And they introduced their radials in 1989 at Daytona. Well, they had some problems, and I remember Bill Elliott crashed on the backstretch and broke his leg. And Goodyear said, I think we're going to withdraw from the Daytona 500.
Holy moly.
Yeah. So we're at the hotel room, and it was Bob Newton, Terry Newton, his son, Dennis Sherman, who was a big part of Hoosier Tire. Dennis was he was awesome. He was just absolutely awesome. And I'll never forget, we were at the hotel and the phone rang, and it was Bill France. And Bill's like, Bob, he says, Goodyear's telling me that they're going to pull out. And I just want to make sure that you've got enough tires that you can supply all the cars for Daytona. And Bob's like, yep, sure bet. We can do it. No problem. No problem. He hung up the phone, and Terry and all of us were looking at each other like, wait a minute, how are we going to make this happen? And I'm going to tell you what, Herm, we had tires every day, building them, shipping them down to Daytona every single day, back and forth in 89. And that's when our buddy Schrader on the pole for the Daytona 500 in 1989. And that was the one and only race at DW. One Daytona was on Hoosier Tires.
Okay, this is unbelievable. We don't have selective memory, but you are reminding us all. What year was that again?
1989.
1989.
Yep.
For the Daytona 500, the complete field was on Hoosier Tires.
Well, all except for Dave Marcus.
Oh, yeah.
Dave Marcus still wore his Goodyear hat and had his Goodyear tires on, but he was laps down. But if I'm not mistaken, I think Earnhardt Sr., he might have started on Goodyears, but the first pit stop, he came and he put Hoosiers on.
This is unbelievable. I forgot all about this.
Yeah.
So now, I understand this. If you're going to get into the sport, you would think that, when one tire maker is the only choice and another one comes in, okay, we agree with all the rules. So these were tire wars. I guess you had to somehow try to be better than Goodyear. So now now listen, I am not putting words in your mouth. I'm talking and you're going to correct me. These were called the tire wars. Now, why would I get rid of my Goodyears and go to a Hoosier or vice versa? Why would you get rid, So what do we do? Just make it a little bit softer rubber and then we were in a tire war.
Yeah, you had to back then you have to get so close on the edge, right? And you have to make softer tires. You have to be able to qualify. The whole thing was getting qualified, right? But you still had to make them things so you could qualify, Herm. But you still was able to say like, hey, 10 laps into this run, we're out of tires. You can't do that. So it was a real tough balancing act that you had because you had to make them fast, but had to make them live too. But in 89, Goodyear had come out with the radials, and the radials were superior to what we were with bias ply, and we didn't have radial capacity back in 1989.
Yeah.
So going forward, we worked on it. We got our radial so we could have radial building stuff. So we come back in 94, right? So we pulled out in 1989. We come back in 94, right? We're going to go back into it. And Kenny, that was with Jeff Gordon. It was Sachs. We had Greg Sachs, both Burtons, Ward and Jeff. And we tested. Bob had his own, at that point in time, he had his own twin engine plane that he had here in Plymouth, Indiana. And I'll never forget, this was our routine for the whole, up until the Brickyard, and I'll get to the Brickyard, but we would leave we'd be in the office all day Monday. Tuesday morning, 5 a.m., wheels up, we'd fly to where we were going to test with Jeff, with Bodine, right? We'd test there, get done with the test, get back in the plane, fly back to Plymouth, be in the office on Wednesday. And then back then I was overseeing the Busch Grand National stuff. So I'd have to go on Thursday. Then Bob would come in on Friday for the cup stuff. And we'd do that routine after just one after another. But we tested every single week. We tested someplace at a track.
So as I'm listening to you, if you and I are sitting at a bar right now, I would look at you and I'd say, Irish, were you guys making any money doing this, or was this a dream of Bob Newton's?
This is a dream of Bob Newton's. This is a dream. And so we'll go to the Brickyard, right? 94, first Brickyard, right?
Gotcha.
So we tested, Herm, I think we tested 4 times, maybe 5 times at the Brickyard because Bob wanted to be good at this inaugural race in his home state, right?
Yeah, close to home.
And do you know who sat on the pole at that race?
Was what year?
1994, the first Brickyard.
Oh, that Rick Mast, yeah.
Yes, and he was on Hoosier Tires.
I'll be darn.
Yes.
Wow, 2 great reminders already.
Yep. So we were good in the race. And just so happens that Brett and Jeff, I think they had some family issues going on.
Oh, my God, that was unbelievable.
And Brett got into Jeff and spun, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. We could have won it. And, of course, Gordon wins the race, right?
Yeah.
So after that, I'm sitting to myself thinking, this is a lot of work. And I told Joyce, Bob's wife, I said, Joyce, I think I want to just focus back on short track stuff because I was getting guys like Jan Leedy and some of these NASCAR modified guys because I was still doing that, the modifieds, plus I was doing this Xfinity, and I couldn't, well, back then it was a Busch, but I still couldn't focus all my time on the short track stuff. And they'd give me the call and say, Irish, you forgot all about us. You did this. So I said, Joyce, I think I want to back out of this Busch Grand National deal. Maybe find somebody to do it. She hollered over across the hall, Bob, get in here.
Uh-oh.
And she says, Irish just said that he's going to not want to do this Busch Grand National deal. She says, I think you and I need to have a talk, Bob. And right after that, he withdrew from NASCAR.
Wow.
Because it wasn't a moneymaker at all.
This is so heartfelt because I go back to my childhood. I can feel myself right now at Anderson, Indiana. I can feel myself up there at Grand Rapids. And, I know that area. People, engineers, they're innovative. I'm thinking of Bob Seneker and Ed Howe. You guys are innovators of racing in that area. And you guys lived a dream. But in the end, you said this story, your local racers are calling you back. Irish, please come back to our local short track racing. Was this a dream fulfilled?
Yeah. I mean, For Bob, I believe so. Bob was not very good at politics. Him and I were different on this thing. Bob always said, Kenny, I don't ever want to owe you, and I don't want you to ever owe me. Well,
Yeah.
you and I are the opposite. Herm, I want you to always owe me, and I want to always own you, right? I want to
Yeah.
always owe you, right? So, but yeah, it was a dream. And I'm telling you, Bob, he said, you know what? Joyce and I own Hoosier, but it's all the employees that make this thing work. It's from down to the people that load the trucks, that unload the trucks, that build the tires. The employees is what really made it, and they had the passion for it.
Obviously, I studied you. I got my notes right here, and on one of my areas, I said, "What was your relationship with Bob Newton?" And now I don't have to ask the question. He really put a lot of trust in you. He was lucky. Listen, I'm not speaking for you, but I'm just saying I know Mary Purvis. I know the whole deal. Mike Allgaier, Hoosier Tire Midwest. You were the right man for the job. Bob was lucky. He was lucky that you went by in that school bus and looked at that building. How much do you miss Bob?
Every day. It's like missing your father, Kenny.
Yeah.
Is what it is. Every day. And there's certain things I'll never forget. He taught you a lot of things in life. Like I'd be driving him and we'd be going to a race. I'm like, hey, Bob, I gotta pull in here. I gotta get gas, right? Wait a minute, kid. Go to that next station. It's 1 penny cheaper.
He would tell you that.
Oh,
that
yeah.
was a dad.
Yeah. And he always told me when I first started, he said, just remember one thing, kid. He says, always spend my money like it's your own. Because when you give that hat or that jacket away, that Hoosier jacket away to somebody, I might not reimburse you for that. And you might have to pay that out of your own pocket. And that was the whole thing going through Hoosier. I always had that mentality that I'm going to spend money like it's my own.
Wow. That's so heartfelt.
Yep.
Okay. We're moving right on along here. So now you get back to the short tracks.
Yep.
Okay. Now, okay. Wow. That was great stories. And I really want to thank you. Those are 2 highlights. That's pretty incredible. Pretty much the whole field at the day. What year was that again? I'm going to write it down.
1989.
Yes.
That's when DW did the Iki Shuffle. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you look at it, there's Hoosier Tires on there. He's got the Hoosier decal on it.
Gosh. Yeah. DW. Charlie Marlowe, my buddy and YouTube manager, Charlie. Talk about that. That's a good one right there. What year? I bet that is some board game, trivia. That is incredible. I just can't get over that.
I just thought of something. I got one more story I got to tell about cup stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So you remember our buddy Brad Knopfsinger, right?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Well.
So Knopfy, I'm down there. Bob sent me down there to go see all the Busch Grand National teams one time, and Knopfy was doing the petty drive, right? He says, "Come on over here to Charlotte." He says, "I'm going to give you a ride in that car." I'm like, all right, I'll do that thing. So I get in there and he goes, okay, now cinch up, pull down hard, I said, all right. So we go out there and we make a lap. And Kenny, I hope you can relate to this. We're going around there and we're probably running, those things were like 170 or 180 mile an hour we're running.
Fast enough.
Yeah, fast enough. And I'm riding in the passenger seat. And as we go into the corner, I feel that I hear this car is just bang, 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 just pounding, And I'm like, we got done. I get her. I said, Brad, is all these tracks this rough? He goes, oh, no, this is Charlotte. This is one of the smoother tracks of them.
Oh, it's true.
I'm like, well, wait a minute. I said, you're lifting because the car's getting so upset. He goes, yeah. So as I get in there and I got thinking to myself, Kenny, if I can make that tire so it goes over the bumps a lot better, you'll just stay in the throttle, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't have cell phones back then. I called back. I talked to the head engineer, John, back then. I said, hey, is there any way you can change this construction? I told him a couple things to do. And I said, we can try it to get it to go over these bumps and smooth it out. Yeah, we'll try it. So we went down, did a test, and it was with Nemechek, and Jeff Bodine was there, DW was there, and I'll never forget DW. He always wanted to feel good, right? He had to have that comfort level for him, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we put these new tires on Bodine. He's good. Nemechek's like, oh, yeah, badass, awesome. Nemechek's favorite word was awesome, by the way.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. So
you know what mine is? It's a 4-letter word. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple
Go
of
ahead.
them. You got.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyhow, we put these tires on DW, and he goes out there and he comes in. He goes, "Well, that's a good set of tires right there." He says, "That's just like sitting back in your old recliner and just watching TV." He says, "And drinking a cold one." I'm
I
like,
love it.
I guess it'd be
Wow.
good. And then those tires are the one that Jeff Bodine ended up winning the Winston that year
And
at
you
Charlotte.
know, 1984, I'm a Cup crew chief for Joe Ruttman, Levi Garrett car, and the tires evolved. You know, there was a time they didn't even know what stagger was, but you know, when engineering started coming in, they would rate the tires. You know,
Mm-hmm.
rate them like a spring. You know, put
Yep.
air pressure. You know, so you were ahead of your time, Irish. That was a very smart move on you. Where did you know? How did you know to do that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You know, racing motocross when I was a kid, I
Yeah,
felt a lot of different things. You know, I mean, and I
yeah,
knew as a racer, you got to have that. You know, if you don't feel that you can hold that thing wide open, you don't want to get hurt.
right.
So what do we got to do on our part? The tire's a spring, right? What do we got to do to get that thing to absorb the energy so that you can keep the throttle down and drive through them bumps, right?
Yeah, I'll never forget Brother Rusty teaching me so much, and he would say, "Herman, believe your ass." So, in
Yeah.
other words, you know, I'm not Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon was a gift from God. He could handle his car the way he could, but in other words, you know, I'm just saying you're right because when I would think, you know, everyone, all race car drivers, there's a time where you know, there's that little gremlin in the back. You kind of doubt your talent. You're like, okay, maybe I'm not pushing the limit. And me and Kyle Busch talk about that. He says on his data with, you know, the teams he's been with, Kyle Busch drives on the other edge of the spectrum where he's almost going to spin out, but that's just what he does. He doesn't know
Mhm.
he does it.
Right.
Well, what Rusty meant was, you know, my talent, what God gave me is like when I think I'm going to wreck, I am. I
Yeah.
will wreck.
Yeah.
So you're saying when you were riding in that race car, you're like, this is not good.
Yeah. No, I just knew it. I mean, that wasn't a good feeling. I knew that, you know, I just knew that. So it was good that I understood. And God, I mean, I got to go back and tell a quick Jeff Gordon story. Back in, gosh, I'm trying to think. He was 13 years old then. We were at East Bay Raceway. And this kid comes walking up, and he's got this Hoosier hat on, and it's down over his ears. The hat's way bigger than the kid's head, right? And he says, "Mr. Saunders," which I thought, you know, he's calling me Mr. Saunders. It should be Irish. Mr. Saunders shakes my hand. He goes, "My name's Jeff Gordon, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be one of the best race car drivers ever." And I'll never
Wow.
forget that. And then, of course, I met John Bickford right after that. You know, John introduced himself to me, meeting Jeff. You know, so it was like great times. I remember, this is what I remember one time about Jeff, is that Rich Vogler when he got killed at Salem, I was there that night. Rich and I were very, very close. And Kenny, out of all my life, that was probably the closest that I wanted to retire, because I'm like, I can't be close to my friends and this happens, right? So I called Joyce and Bob, and they said, don't come home tonight, because, you know, Salem to Plymouth, it was probably a 4-hour drive. Don't come home.
Dark back roads.
Yep. Don't come home. So it just so happens there was this young kid by the name of Jeff Gordon that drove me. He had his learner's permit, drove me to their house, John and Carol's house in Pittsburgh, and I stayed there that night. And I mean, but it's, you know, it's just part of life, you know.
What is it? You've seen a lot. So I think you're one of the best to ask. You've seen a lot. You've seen more than me. I mean, because, you know, I'm an asphalt guy and now I run dirt, but you've seen open wheel, you've seen all types, road course. What is it about like a Tim Richmond, a Rich Vogler? These guys were out of control, but in control.
Yeah.
They, you know, when I think of Vogler, I think of Tim Richmond and my brother Mike Wallace. It's like, oh, they're going to wreck, but they don't, and
They don't.
they drive every lap like that.
Yeah.
Was Rich like that?
Absolutely. Rich Vogler would tell you, "Kenny, I drive every lap to win, whether it be practice, qualifying, heat race, or the feature." And Vogler was this, you know, he had his pilot's license, right? And he was down there in Brownsburg. And he never, ever would say anything bad about the tires if we had, because there were some races we had bad tires on dirt, but he would, the next day, he would get on that plane, fly to Plymouth, Indiana, come over here to the plant in Plymouth and talk to the engineers about what we got to do to get better. But yeah, he was 100% every lap he ran.
Oh my God. This is such a heartfelt conversation. I'm going to try so hard right now. I want to find this quote by Joe Rogan. I'll look for it as we continue to speak, and we'll come back to it. Okay. So every time I try to move forward in this conversation,
I know we go back.
You wow me. I mean, you
back.
truly do. But you know what? You're making it easy on me, Irish, because you're telling your story. And I think it gives everybody a good look inside your life. What I liked about what you just said was that Rich Vogler was not a hater. He was a fixer.
Yes.
Great here. No, that's not it either. But my point is that leaders fix things. Here it is right here. Haters are all failures. It's 100% across the board. No one who is truly brilliant at anything is a hater, by Joe Rogan. So in other words, there are people in life that they just bitch, moan, and complain. Mm-hmm. And what you're telling me about the great Rich Vogler is he didn't bitch. He said, we got to fix this.
Right.
That is the difference between, the flock that follows the leader. The leader fixes things. The flock, correct. They just, they take the easy way out. And I say that. I'm going to say it one more time. Haters are all failures. It's 100% across the board. No one who is truly brilliant at anything is a hater. So Rich Vogler never hated anything. He's always trying to figure out how to fix it.
Right.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah,
I really like that.
He was good. And I can tell you another quick story. Our buddy Bentley Warren, right?
Oh, I got him on my list to call. I got his phone number.
Oh, you got to be. I think you definitely need to call him. he would be, as he would say, this would be a wicked good time, right? Wicked Love good. It. So do you remember Doug Hevron, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Okay.
So I'm at Sandusky Speedway. I'm trying to get into the super modifieds on the asphalt. Goodyear had it all, right? And I'm trying to get in there. So obviously, Hevron and I are down at the bar having a few beers. And I said, I just got to get somebody running these tires, Doug. He goes, bring those 4 over. He said, we'll put them on Freddie Graves' car. He said, I'll run them tomorrow. And he ran them at Sandusky and he won. And I'd had him on Bentley before, but Bentley was on a Goodyear deal. And he on purpose would go out there and blister tires. He'd go fast, but he'd blister them. So all of a sudden, because Dougie and Bentley were teammates with Tom Hevron when Tom had the cars, right?
Yeah.
And anyhow, he got Bentley to do it. And I'll never forget this. We went up there and I did a test with Bentley at Oswego, and everybody's on Goodyears. And back then you could run a 1720 was good on Goodyears. We were going 1680s, right? And man, we're all high-fiving each other. Herm, we're like, oh, we're going to win. We're going to win everything, right? And I'll never forget this. And I hope nobody forgets this to this day. Bentley Warren looked at me, and I think you can relate to it, Herm. He says, remember one thing, the faster you go, the harder it is to pass.
This reminds me of something Kenny Schrader taught me when I started racing. Now you're making me connect the dots because, Kenny Schrader has taught me a lot about dirt racing. And now that you're telling me this, all the open wheel guys, they always had to save their tires. Those big champ cars.
Yep.
Schrader would say to me, you can put on any tire you want. Put a soft one on. He goes, I can make them last. Because I guess those open wheel guys knew how to ruin a tire, didn't they?
Oh, big time.
But then they knew how to save a tire. What is that, Irish? Is that an open wheel thing?
I think it is, because you remember Bob Fry that used to run sprint cars, win the Little 500 with Glenn Nibel?
Yeah.
I'll never forget when Glenn Nibel called me and said, hey, Fry's going to retire. He said, we got to find somebody that can be in this race. I said, hey, let's call Bentley Warren. He's good at the Oswego Classic, 200-lap race. He knows how to conserve stuff. He'll be great. And I'll never forget that Nibel and him got there, and he should have won the first year there, but I think he bounced off the wall, had a flat tire, had to come in. He made, and don't quote me on this, but I think it was like 7 or 8 laps under the green made up after he came in and put tires on. Bentley was amazing. Bentley was badass to the bone, 100%.
Okay, Irish, sometimes I get in trouble. When I did Mark Richards, that, is part owner at Rocket Chassis, I went on like an hour and a half, and everybody's like, you should have went longer. Then I got this group over here. Oh, it's too long. But we're at 45 minutes. So we're not going to fast forward, but we like these to be an hour because they just do good at an hour, and we'll come back another day. But we still got 15 minutes. So, all right, let's skip forward now. Your back short track racing, your stories are incredible. Not just are you designing tires, making tires, you're going all over America and you're meeting all these drivers. You're the face of Hoosier Tire. We lose Bob Newton. We've done talked about Bob. Continental Tires buys Hoosier Tires.
Yeah.
Tell me about this moment. Where were you? When did you go, oh my, okay, so tell me about this time.
So Bob had a relationship with Continental in general back in because they built the street tires, right? The Hoosier Performance street tires back in the day.
I never knew.
Yep. With all those tires, they were built by Continental or General back then, back in the day. Actually, Kelly Springfield, which is Goodyear, was building them when we were cup racing in '94. So Goodyear was building Hoosier street tires back then. But there's tons.
And that's the rest of the story.
Yeah. So Bob had a relationship with Continental, and Dennis Sherman, John DeSalle, they put this together with Joyce that Continental would come in, and I believe it was 8 years ago, and purchase Hoosier, right? And I'll never forget Nico Seltzer, who's the CEO of Continental over in Germany. He came there and spoke in front of us, and he says, we know nothing about race tires. We are a street tire company. We're buying this company because you are the largest race tire company in the world, and you know how to do it, and we're not going to change anything. Well, that lasted for a little while.
Yeah.
And, it's all about the people that made Hoosier, right? I mean, all the people that are there, engineers, our distributors were a key and still are to this day, or well, when I left, they were still, but I don't know today, but they were key in making and building the relationships with all the racetracks, all the racers, and making the product shine. They were a big part of it.
I can't believe that I have not been following you on Facebook. And when I went on your Facebook before this conversation, I scrolled your Facebook, and you love Ryan Preece, and you love you love Justin Allgaier.
Yeah.
So you've made relationships, and when I see how much you love Justin Allgaier, I'm assuming that's because his dad is Mike Allgaier.
Yes.
Who is the largest Hoosier Tire distributor. He's in Springfield, Illinois. It's Hoosier Tire Midwest. So I can understand, things being different when somebody else comes in. How big is Gator? How big is Mike Allgaier in your life?
Gator is a huge part of my life. I go back to this story with Terry Young. So back in the day,
Terry, yes.
Yeah, Terry Young. So I go back to this story, and I can't remember the year, Herm, what it was, but all of Iowa was on McCurry tires back then, right?
Oh, I remember.
And I said, Gator, why don't we take your bus? It was motorhome. I said, and you and I will just go and we'll visit every one of these racetracks.
Yeah.
He says, yeah, let's give it a whirl. And we did it. We switched everybody over to Hoosiers just by making that road trip. And I'll never forget, and I still have it to this day, Terry Young took a $100 bill, and what he did is he blew it up, and he wrote on there, I will never doubt thee again, Terry Young, and he signed it.
To you?
To me, yeah. So I still have that to this day. That's
badass.
Yep.
I got to go back to Bob Newton for a minute, because when we interview people and we put them in a position, Bob Newton saw something in you because you made moves that even Terry Young had to admit, "Yep, I'll never doubt you again."
Yeah.
Big Bob knew that about you at a child age. I think that's awesome. I think that says a lot about great innovators recognize people for the job, and you were the man for the job for 40 years.
Yeah, 43 to be exact.
Yeah, Richard Petty.
Yeah, 40. Oh man, I never thought about that.
Well, that's the way us goofy racers are. Don't you sit down at a restaurant that's kind of just a normal, it's got a number on it. Oh, look, I'm at an Earnhardt table 3.
Yeah. I mean, hey, here's a crazy thing. So Herm, my son got paralyzed racing motocross, right? He raced for Tony.
I got him on my list.
Yep. Yeah. So Eric got paralyzed in would have been the fall of 2010, just the day before his 18th birthday. He got paralyzed. And what's really crazy is his number was 349, but his pro number was 449. Mm-hmm. And he gets $449 of Medicare. That's what he gets a month now.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy how that number, 449, is really crazy, But again, I've been so blessed. I'm so fortunate to have friends like yourself and Tony and Travis Pastrana and Kevin Harvick and Dale and all these people. Just built a relationship. But I've always said you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with, right? Yeah. And I've always tried to do that and surround. I mean, you might call me and say, "Hey, Irish, I got to have that." Herm, I don't have the answer for that, but by God, I know the person I can get it for, and I would do that.
I want to take a little time and tell you that I'm sorry about your boy Eric being paralyzed, but you're the man for the job. You're a wonderful father, and I've seen everything you've done, and you've given him the best life possible after that accident. How is everything going with Eric right now?
Oh, they're doing great. As a matter of fact, now that I have some free time, I really don't. I'm busy now, but they both, Eric and Garrett, my youngest son, he never wanted to race motocross at all, Herm. But we go here to Plymouth, and after we had purchased the track at Plymouth, we put him in a front wheel drive the first night out, and he wins. And I'm like, where'd this come from? I have no clue,
Yeah.
And so he's winning. So now this year we're gonna run wing sprint cars on dirt.
Oh my!
Garrett's going to run the little 500 for Brad and Tara Armstrong. And we're working a program with GM Performance to try that 525 in that car, try to get the cost down on engines, right, for everyone. And then we're bringing back Thursday Night Thunder at IRP with the Focus.
That made Jeff Gordon, Thursday Night Thunder.
So, and they're going to do all-star races. They're going to get Tony to come back in. I think Pastrana wants to. I'm going to talk to Ricky Carmichael about running a midget. But Eric is going to run a midget with hand controls. And you know who's going to be his crew chief? Mike Fedorchak.
Oh, my gosh.
The Munchkin. He's the one that designed the hand controls for Eric's race cars. Mike Fedorchak.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
So he made the Munchkin that races the Rumble.
Yep. Raceway Park back in the day. That was him. Mike Fedorchak.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. That makes me happy. Okay. Yep. Well, I was feeling sorry for you a little bit, and you're the man for the job. You've taken your children, and you win the Superman Dad Award. That makes me very happy. Congratulations.
Yeah, I've got a great family. My oldest daughter, Nicole, she went to races. She's got a couple of grandkids now. My wife,
How many
Sheila.
kids you have? How many kids?
Well, I got 3. I got Nicole's the oldest, then Eric. He was the chosen one, which you asked Nicole. She'll tell you that. And then I have Garrett, which is my youngest. He's 28, and then I have 2 grandchildren. Isla, which was born on my birthday also. She's going to be 2 this year, and Weston, he's going to be 4. So just so you know, I got Weston a quarter midget too, by the way.
Oh, by God, you're going to be a race car driver.
By God, whether you like it or not, you're going to do it,
Okay. I want to get to a part that made you extremely worldwide famous, and then I want to talk about the drivers like a Scott Bloomquist. But okay, so you're with Hoosier Tire. You're at a racetrack, like you always are, and the tire might have some issues, and you're doing what you do. You're Irish Saunders. You're quality control. You're trying to take care. Like Rich Vogler. What do we got to do to fix this?
Right.
And you come up against a man last year that assaults you, gets physical with you, knocks you down. This makes worldwide news. And not long later, you said, look, I've had enough. Tell me about this man assaulting you over the Hoosier Tires.
Well, it was in October, and I'd went to IRP. I hadn't been to a Silver Crown race, and Kenny, I've been traveling all over the country this year trying to fix problems, whether it be with the Cars Tour, with ASA, with the Modifieds, with whatever it might be. So I'm traveling all over, right?
Right.
So I go to IRP, and of course I start walking through the pits, and they all start complaining about the product, on dirt and the product on asphalt. My tires shrink and they grow. And
right to your face, right to your face.
Oh yeah, they're all right to my face. They're all complaining. Right as I walk down pit road, I make my rounds. I just go from one all there, and they're all complaining. Something I've heard all year long, right? So the races are over. A couple guys come to me and say, I would have won this race, but my right rear shrunk 1/4 of an inch. And finally, the one guy said, if you fell 1/4 of an inch, you should not be doing this. You should be Formula One racing, because if you got that kind of a feel and you can't handle it, And so I leave the pits, I drive out of the pits, and I said, I need to talk to Seymour's about midget tires. So I drive around, and you know how the tunnel is going underneath the tunnel there in turn 4.
Yeah, you walk.
Yep, I walk through the tunnel. I get to the top of the tunnel, and here's this guy, big guy, probably 6'4", 6'5", probably 260 pounds, got a beard, wearing a Brady Bacon T-shirt. He looks at me and he says, hey, you're pretty brave wearing that Hoosier shirt in this pit. Do you know that? I'm like, hey, I said, I'm working on some stuff, And he goes into the price of these tires are this, and they're just garbage and all this other stuff. And he points to me and he says, and you, my friend, are single-handedly ruining racing. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not ruining your racing. He goes, well, maybe it's not you, but it's your effing company. And he shoves me on the ground and takes off underneath the tunnel. And people went to try to find him. They never could find him. Don't know who he was. And at that point in time, I called my wife. I said, this is it. And she goes, it's probably time. She goes, 36 years of being together. She says, and this, all we hear all night long is complaints. It might be time. I called Tony. Tony's like, we need you, but you don't need that. Harvick, the same way, So I reached out to a lot of my friends to ask them, and I just got to the point where I went to the president and told him, and he just said, well, I'm sorry. And I said, well, okay, I'm done. And I'm done from Hoosier, not from racing.
Yeah. And so when the owner said, okay, that's basically what's sad is Hoosier Tires is gone, the family's gone. So there was nobody to go, man, Hoosier, or, Irish, you've been here for us forever. This makes me think about what is going on with society more so today that was not back. When I grew up in racing, we were all into fix issues. Mm-hmm. It was like everybody was together, to fix issues.
Yep.
So this onslaught of hate, it goes with every tire maker. I mean, I ran USMTS where you're running the American racer. Mm-hmm. We've heard about McCreary, Hoosier, Goodyear, and I know you know this, Irish, but it's with everybody and everything. Everybody hates everything. What is going on? What do you think?
Well, you know what I think, Kenny, is I think the cost of racing is getting so expensive anymore, right? Yeah. And here's the thing I look at. Herm, you were very lucky in your career that you made a living off racing, right?
Yeah, I did.
You made a living, right?
Yeah.
But think about it, Kenny. Most people that race, they do this as a hobby. Yeah. This is a hobby. And hobbies got to be two things. They got to be fun and they got to be affordable. And if one of those two things go away, they're going to park their stuff and they're going to go find another hobby to do.
Good point, Irish. So you're saying that the local racer is taking the money out of their family's mouth. And so instead of buying dinner, they're buying a tire.
Yep.
And if that tire has an issue, this tire is my whole fault, my whole life. Yep. It's the tire's fault. Wow. Yeah.
I've never heard a driver say that I screwed up. Have you ever heard very few drivers say, hey, you know what? It was just on me tonight, right? Yeah. It's usually, the setup was wrong, or the shock wasn't right, or the tire wasn't right, or I didn't have enough stagger, or whatever. There's only one guy that's happy at the end of the night, and that's the guy sitting in victory lane, right?
You bring up a good point. And over the last 3 years, I've tried, when I do these coffee with Kenny's, I admit, hey, I drove bad last night. I told Nick Hoffman that the first night at Volusia, I said, man, Nick, I said, if you want to load up, I said, I'm driving horrible. And he looked at me, he goes, Herm, all we got to do is put on a new nose. You're fine. Let's go. And we recovered, but you're right. I think it's immaturity, even with old men that pushed you down.
Yeah.
You know, I'll get on social media and I'll see people MF Tony Stewart. I will see people MF Kevin Harvick, Jimmy Johnson. You could win it all and they still hate you.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Yeah, I believe so. You know, everybody hates a winner. Right?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that happened to you, Irish.
Yeah, I appreciate it. But that's all part of life, you know? I mean, again, I wanted to make sure through my career that if you came to me and you said, man, Irish, these tires aren't doing this particular thing. And okay, that I take a mental note that Kenny Wallace told me that. Now, if Kenny Schrader comes and tells me the same thing and Tony Stewart tells me the same thing, then now I better start looking at, okay, engineering, here's what we got to do. We got to make these so they'll do this. I got to make them, they got to turn better. They got to have more drive. What do you got to, we're trying to fix that problem. I always wanted to try to fix a problem for everybody, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Okay. Well, so now you are, well, I'll never forget this phrase. Felix Sabatis told me this, the word content. Content means you're satisfied. So I take it you're not satisfied. You're still digging. And as you try to retire, I'm sure everybody knows what you're good at. So, okay, now you're gone from Hoosier, Continental Tire. Now what are we doing?
Well, I'm out here at the golf course doing some promotion stuff, right? Trying to make an awareness for this place. Yeah. And this is a crazy story. And I know you have a very good relationship with Sunoco, but there was a gentleman, you remember the old Torco race fuel back in the day?
I do. Okay,
so a guy by the name of Chuck Newton. Yeah, Sunoco, I see it. So Chuck Newton, no relation to Bob Newton, from Lafayette, Indiana. When Torco had his problem back then, this gentleman by the name of Chuck Newton bought all the equipment from Torco and he hired the blender. Okay. And this is in 2008. And we ran it in a motocross bike. And you know, he's no relation to Bob, right? But here's the crazy thing about it. Chuck Newton's wife, her name was Joyce, just like Bob Newton's wife was Joyce.
So this is meant to be whatever you're going to tell me.
Yeah. So he's like, hey, Irish, I don't know anybody in the industry. Would you try to help me put Party A and Party B together? And I can do that. So I'm helping Chuck do that a little bit now, right, with that. And I'm also helping GM Performance with this crate motor deal because I firmly believe we got to get the cost of racing down some, right?
Yeah.
To make it this hobby affordable and fun again. You know,
yeah.
So I'm doing those things right now, plus racing with the boys. So I'm involved in a lot of stuff still. I'm not going to sit still. You know, not going to sit still.
I love it. Okay, we're going to end like this. I want to know a story about Scott Bloomquist. Was Scott big with Hoosier Tires?
He was huge. He was absolutely huge. But you got to go one step further. When I first met Scott through Randy Sweet.
Two, I'm going to say this and I'm going to let you go. Two of the most crazy people and two of the most brilliant people in our lifetime.
100%.
Two Einsteins, kind of like an Elon Musk. Like Elon is weird. People badmouth him, but the most brilliant mind of all time. So, yes. Okay. Tell me about Bloomquist and Randy Sweet.
Well, Randy Sweet, I don't know if you knew this or not. Did you know that Randy worked for Bob Newton?
No idea. Wow.
Okay, so you remember the triple disc clutch, the Hoosier triple disc clutch?
Well, absolutely. I ran quartermaster stuff my whole life, but
I
still do.
Guess who started that? Randy Sweet.
Brilliant.
Randy Sweet, when I was working on the dock, right, during those summers, Randy Sweet was working for Bob. He was still racing, had the number 17 car, right? And he would go to races, and I mean, he was a genius. But Randy Sweet was so far ahead of his time, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I'll never forget what he told me. He says, air's free. You got to use it. To this day, I keep thinking about it. Air is free. You got to use it, right? But Randy he was such a innovator he was way ahead of himself, Herm, on a lot of things. I mean, the triple disc clutch brought it over from over in England. and got the Hoosier triple disc clutch started, and was selling hard parts back then besides selling recaps. And he was great. And then he starts Sweet Manufacturing, right? And he always told me, he goes, I learned from Joyce Newton. Make sure everybody pays their bill.
Yeah.
I mean, he was great, and he helped a lot with he did a lot of things. And Scott was, I didn't really have too much dealings with Scott. That was more Shannon Rush. He did a lot of stuff with Scott because Shannon overseen all the dirt late model stuff, right?
I know Shannon. I'd like to give a shout out to Shannon. Hi, Shannon. So is it true? I don't want to back, you against the wall, but was it true that Scott Bloomquist got free Hoosier tires his whole life?
Well, he was one of our, I mean, here, listen, when you're racing somebody, there was people that you had on tire deals, right?
Right.
And to make sure that he was an influencer, that he was
Right.
going to go out and win and promote the product. And yeah,
Right.
there's a lot of guys that got free product to help us do that. That was
Right.
instead of running an ad in some place,
Right.
you would use tires instead, to make these influencers get on your product. I mean, it's no different. It's no different than, because of my background with moto, I was overseeing the moto stuff. So I was real close to getting Carmichael to start promoting and running Hoosiers,
And they're smart. They're
Yeah.
smart. They can help you too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's helping each other, I mean, that's how it worked. But yeah, Scott was on a tire program with Hoosier, 100%. He was. And there was, back in the day, Buck Simmons, Larry Moore,
yeah.
Charlie Swartz. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll just go on and on and on. There was tire programs out there,
Yeah. But you do make me happy, and I'm smiling because Randy Sweet's boy and myself in our early days, we're talking like children. I'd go to these ASA races, and man, Randy Sweet was brilliant, but wild. And I want to thank you for bringing up Randy Sweet's name. He was the innovator. I can remember all of us going to Winchester, Indiana, and we could hardly turn the car, so we'd run negative caster in the left front, positive in the right front. And when you go in the corner, if you were to just let go of the steering wheel a little bit, that thing would turn to the left all by itself. So Randy, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, I'm telling this for our viewers. Randy created the power steering for all short track, all racing, all short track racing. He made it compatible. He put the rack and pinion on power steering. He was brilliant. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember, Herm, I got to ask you, do you remember a racer by the name of Denny Nyari?
Oh my God. Yes. 100%.
Okay.
Denny
So
Nyari, yeah.
as I was growing up through my childhood, Denny was my hero. All right.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one more quick story here of Bob Newton. Bob calls me up in the office. This is in the early 80s. He says, kid, he says, how are we going to get this asphalt program off the ground? I said, Bob, we got to get Denny Nyri to start doing testing. He says, how can we get a hold of him? I said, dial 289-8661. That was his number.
Oh my God, you still remember it.
I still remember it. Yeah, I still remember his number, right? So I knew that Denny everybody respected Denny. He was always a straight shooter. And Denny started doing the testing. And to this day, I will give Denny Nyri credit for Hoosier as what they're at today in the asphalt world. It was Denny. Denny was very honest. If he'd come in, he'd say, those 4 tires, throw them in the dumpster. There's no good when we tire test, right?
Yeah.
And I remember our compounder once said, that compound should work. Can we sneak them in somewhere else? And we'd sneak them in like four sets later. He'd go out there and run 3 laps. He'd come in. He says, I thought I told you to take that set and throw it in the dumpster.
He had a good ass.
Yeah, he had a good ass. He could feel that stuff,
He could feel it.
But Denny was phenomenal. He was great. And to this day, I give Denny Nyri a lot of credit for where Hoosier's at for asphalt.
And as we talk about history, I know basically one of your local tracks there is South Bend. Have they tore it down yet? Is South Bend Indiana?
Not yet. I think, as a matter of fact, I talked to the guy that owns it yesterday, and I think they have it sold, but it will not be a racetrack anymore. It'll be gone.
Well, as Schrader would say, not time to be sad. Obviously, they don't want it there, so let's move on.
And Kenny, the thing I always say with racetracks now is I use this saying, there's not enough inventory to fill the shelves. And the inventory is fans and race cars, and the shelves are racetracks. Yeah. And that's my saying now that I tell people,
Bob Sargent would say to me, Kenny Wallace, we have too many racetracks. And, you know, I'd say, Bob, but when you stop, I mean, right here in St. Louis, I live, okay, from where I live, and I'm just going on what you just said. I like what you said because I've heard this through Bob Sargent. And when I think about Bob, I'm like, he could be right, because right where I live, 15 minutes down the road is Federated I-55 Speedway. 30 minutes over here is Tri-City Speedway, Granite City, Illinois. 1 hour here is Highland. Hour and a half is Brownstown. Now they're getting ready to tear down Belle Claire like March 10th, and they got like $20 million of COVID money. Now, right across the river, they're getting ready to build this beautiful dirt track. So I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to have and you got Quincy. I mean, we're going to have dirt tracks out the ass.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they're all going to get along, but it's going to be something to watch. And hopefully they will be able to do it, because we did in the day, but in the day we had so many more race cars.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Well, as I always end, there he is, ladies and gentlemen. Irish Saunders. The stories are unbelievable. You took me to 1 hour and 10 minutes because you were so awesome. Irish, I want to thank you so much.
No, Herm, it's an honor to be on your show. Thank you and your family for what you've done for motorsports. It's been great. And what you're doing for motorsports today. I still want you to always do me a favor and always be a character, please. Okay?
Yeah.
Because
I can't.
can you top Cletus McFarland though? Can you top Garrett Mitchell?
By the way, I did get a hold of Garrett Mitchell, a.k.a. Cletus McFarland, and he said, let's do it. So we're going to do a Kenny conversation with him, and I will be in one of those Crown Victoria races. And if any of you have made it this far, which, when we do this, people, they listen to 20 minutes, they shut it off, they turn it on again. But if you've made it this far, everybody, I just made an announcement. Yes, Cletus McFarland is coming on Kenny Conversation. And yes, I will be in a Crown Victoria race. Okay, everybody, listen up. Remember, this is a reminder. This is just not on YouTube, but we are in podcast form. We are on Dirty Mo Media platform. Kenny Conversation is over on podcast at Dale Jr.'s Dirty Mo Media platform. So remember, if you want to put it in your ears while you're mowing the grass, go right on over there to Dale Jr.'s Dirty Mo Media. If you want to look at Irish's pretty face, you stay right here on YouTube. So, Irish, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kenny. It's been an honor, and I really appreciate it very much.
All right. Until the next Kenny Conversation, goodbye, everybody.